Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Not bad. It's Friday. Does anybody have any questions before we start today? Yes. Yeah.
This is on 5.
Yes. No, this one. Anybody else? All right. Well, as he just mentioned, there is a discussion forum due this week. Well, as a matter of fact, it's due by the end of the night. So make sure that you keep that in mind. If you've not yet participated, be sure to log on and participate. Okay? The other thing that I've been getting a lot of questions about is should we start reading the next book, which is entitled Sam Patch? My answer to that is no. And it's not because I want you to procrastinate as much as, well, two things really. One, you don't have a context for that right now. I haven't talked about the industrialization of America and I won't for a couple of weeks now. But the even more important reason is that you've got another really major assignment coming up, and that would be your midterm. So what I would do for you, if I were you, would be to prepare yourself for taking the midterm. The best way you can do that, read your notes. You'd be surprised how many people take wonderful, diligent notes and then just never crack them open the week before the exam. And as a consequence to this, don't do very well on the exam. Yeah?
To what point will the midterm follow?
I'll let you know, but it's going to be 1812. That's sort of the
After the war?
no, it's after the War of 1812 and afterward. That's not going to be on the midterm. That you'll be responsible for that on the final. But I'll make a big deal about it. This is no longer relevant to your midterm. It now needs to be focused on the final. Okay? Yeah, I was going to talk about that. It's good that you brought it up. No, it's actually not going to be taken in class. As a matter of fact, the exam is going to be taken online. Now, first and foremost, if you freak out about an online exam, don't worry, let me know, and I'd be glad to put a copy for you in the testing center. You can have a hard copy and do it old school, right? But for most of us, we're going to be taking this online. Now, here's why. On the most basic of levels, my exams are not easy to complete in 55 minutes. They have been done, but generally they don't do so well. So I can't give you more than 55 minutes, considering that's the longest that I can keep you. So if I put this online, you can have much more time to complete it. Secondly, what I used to do to give people ample amounts of time is just make it available in a testing center. Well, to put 180 exams, which is, there's actually more than 180 of you, if you consider all my 3 sections, that would overwhelm the testing center, so that's not an option, and the best option for an exam like this would be to take it online. So it'll be timed, but you'll have more time to do it. You can begin preparing. It's exactly the same as an in-class exam. It's just you're going to be taking it in the privacy of your own home, or maybe the privacy of the library, but you get the idea. Okay? So, does anybody have a question to that end before we go any further?
And will the main focus be the political thought?
That's going to be the essay. Certainly, that would be the essay. But if you're interested in getting a jump start on preparing for it, the best thing that you can do is go to the week 7 assignment folder next week. It's week 7. Open up the assignment folder and download a copy of the review guide. Now, I'll give you a copy next week. I give you everything for these bigger assignments at least 1 week ahead of time. But if you're just chomping at the bit, you can't get enough of this, right? You want to begin preparing for it. You have that ability to do that right now, today. Okay? So, Any other questions? Other questions? Yeah,
Will the exam be on Blackboard?
it will, yeah, it'll be on e-plans.
How much time are
For the multiple choice, it'll be 10 questions, 15 minutes. That sounds like not enough time, but it is online, so if I were to give you unlimited time, I'm not saying that you would, I know that you would, but there have been people that have been known to go to this site called Wikipedia and look up the answers, right? Going on to Wikipedia for a number of different reasons is problematic, but I can't obviously give you open-ended time.
I
No.
know that people change answers and information on.
Well, yes, that, but there are 3 different exams for this class alone, meaning that the exam that you take very well might not be the exam that you take, and that could be different than somebody else's exam. But 10 multiple choice questions. The essay, I'm going to give you much more time because obviously essay writing is much more time consuming. An hour and 20 minutes for the essay. All right, so taken together, you're looking at the better part of 2 hours versus 55 minutes to cram everything in and probably not do so well. Okay? Anybody else have a question? All right, we need to review. And last time we met, we got done fighting a war, right? The American Revolutionary War. I don't mean to ask a stupid rhetorical question, but why did we fight that war? Because we were being wrong. We felt we were being wrong. I want you to keep that in the forefront of your mind. We felt that Britain was violating our rights. We gave a laundry list. Right? First the Declaration of Rights and Grievances, and then the Declaration of Independence. It said this is why we're really mad. Right? Now, who were we fighting against? I know Britain, but who were they in 1776? What kind of military did they have? The best, most powerful military in the world. They just got done defeating the second best, most powerful military in the world, France, not that long before it. Okay? Now, if we're going to win this fight, what do we have to do?
Prolong it as much as possible.
Yes, we need to fight a defensive war and drag our feet, drag that war on for as long as possible. Make it as time-consuming and as expensive for the British as we possibly can. And it also wouldn't hurt to have a ally. Very good. And who is our most likely candidate for that alliance? Very good. Why the French? Yeah, first of all, that's that old antagonism between the Brits and the French. All you really need to do to get them to fight is ask politely, right? But before the French are going to go ahead and side with us, they want to make sure they're not throwing money down a hole, so to speak, right? In other words, they want some assurance that we've at least got a puncher's chance. What do we give them for assurance? Give you a hint, 1777, upstate New York.
Saratoga.
Yeah, the Battle of Saratoga, right? Now, I'm not going to get into the reasons why America won, but you should know that America won that battle. Did it make it close to crushing the British Army? Did we even get in the same zip code as crushing the British Army? No. It's meaningless when it comes to the capacity to continue the war. What Saratoga does do is it keeps the possibility of an alliance with France alive, right? What the French are looking for, give us something, anything, to demonstrate that you've actually got a shot at winning this thing. And that's exactly what Saratoga does, right? So Saratoga puts the French to thinking, maybe these people can actually win. And then later on that winter, the winter of 1777 into the winter of 1778, what you get is Valley Forge. True or false? Is Valley Forge an actual military battle? No. That needs to be in your notes. It does not have anything to do with Americans fighting the Brits. What is it? It's a camp. And it's a very rough, harsh camp. Not enough food, not enough shelter, not enough clothes. Right? So what's the significance of Valley Forge? Very much Steuben, right? And what does von Steuben do? He trains us. He drills us over and over and over and over and over again. And he simplifies it. He waters it down. He dumbs it down to the point where even us podunk farmers are able to understand the concept of retreat. So what comes out of Valley Forge, guys, if it's not in your notes, it needs to be a professional well-trained, hard-nosed veteran army that had seen it all, that had done it all, and now was professional enough to go toe-to-toe with the best that the Brits had to throw at us. You can see it in the following spring of 1778, that we are much, much, much improved, okay? Now, what the combination of Saratoga and Valley Forge produce is the 1778 Treaty of Alliance. What is the Treaty of Alliance? And more importantly, what does it do?
Treaty alliance allows us to ally with the French.
It's an alliance between us and the French. Did you have your hand up? It was just French. Sorry. Anyway, it does something else too. What does it do to the war? Very good. It turns it into a world conflict. Because keep in mind, it's not as if the British are showing up on America's shores and getting ready to kick butt and take names. Do you remember what they're doing? Sorry? Yes, attacking outside of the continental United States. Right? So what that means is if you're Great Britain, you're going to have to keep an eye on more than just the Americans. It's turning it into a two-front battle. That's the main significance, right? What had once upon a time been a civil war is now not only a world war, but the British have to be in two places at once, which is very difficult to do. Right? So the Treaty of Alliance is key to your understanding and as far as what produced an American victory in the Revolutionary War. What ends the war?
The Battle of Yorktown.
Yes, Yorktown, but I'm talking about the actual document. Treaty of Paris, okay? So in 1783, the British go ahead and surrender. They made peace with us by offering us our independence. Now, they now formally recognize that we are free and independent, and in addition to this, what do they do to sweeten the deal? Sorry? Yes, exactly. They give us land where? Ohio River Valley, that land west of the Appalachian Mountain Range. Right now, you keep in mind, we had always had our eye on that, even as far back as the French-Indian War. So this is a really big deal. And why would Britain do that? That's valuable property there. Why would they do that?
Try to sweeten the deal so we don't invade Canada later.
Well, that, and the fact of the matter is, right, their empire is being threatened on a worldwide level. So in order to get back to defending parts of the world that the French are after, that the Dutch are after, what the British have as an incentive is to end this thing quickly and don't waste a lot of time trying to appease the Americans. Okay? Does that make sense, everyone? So we have our independence. Now what? You're a little bit too young, huh? Way too young, a little bit too young. Do you remember when the Boston Red Sox finally got over the hump and won a World Series? For years, Boston was the whiniest fans in Major League Baseball because it'd been over 100 years and it had to be things like, oh, Babe Ruth cursed us, right? So we got to do really weird things like bring this piano out of a pond or whatever. Right? We're serious. But anyway, after they won the World Series, it's like, now what do we do? What do we talk about now? Right? So that was kind of the situation that America had been dealt in 1780. Now what? How do we organize our government? How do we go ahead and figure out who's in charge, what the power is, how much power, how much authority to grant to various lawmakers? What are the rules? We're all over the map. That's what I need you to understand. Don't fall into this trap that we knew exactly what we wanted. Now, don't get me wrong, right? We talked a pretty good game for the better part of 20 years that when we're in charge, it's going to be different, right? Let me ask you something. How many of you have kids, have children? Now, even those of you that don't have kids can answer this question. How many of you have ever said to a parent, when I grow up and I'm a mom and I'm a dad, I'm never going to do this, right? Pretty much everybody. And then the parents in the room. When you grow up, you have kids, you lose 2 years of sleep. What do? Exactly what mom and dad did, right? You found out there was a method to their madness. You found out there's a reason why they made you eat green vegetables and go to bed at 8, right? And the parents in the room will be able to tell me, why do you make them go to bed at 8? So you can watch Breaking Bad, right? can't watch TV when my kid's running around like he's got his hair on fire, right? So anyway, right, we learned the lesson as a political society. You know what? There's a real good reason that they were taxing us, and it had nothing to do with making our lives miserable. So that's where I want to begin. And I've got another very theoretical question for you in a minute. But before we go there, I want to get a definition out of the way, and that would be republicanism, right? Or maybe just, it might be easier for you to understand, republic, right? All republicanism means is a form of government that is not inherited. Write it down. A form of government that is not inherited. It's the exact opposite of what was being implemented throughout most of Europe at the time, where you had aristocrats ruling, right? And they ruled based on their birthrights. The King of England was the king because his dad was the king before him. His dad was the king before him. You get the idea. We've got a form of government where that's not inherited. It's not passed down from generation to generation. In a republic, you have to go out and earn the trust, and in this case, the votes of your constituency, the people, because in this concept, government derives its power from the people, right? So you can't just rely on inheritance. You have to go out there and continuously earn the trust, respect, and confidence of your constituents, the citizens, to be in a position of authority, okay? Does that make sense? So the lifeblood of American democracy would be voting, the institution of voting, all right? Question. Who should be voting? Yes, people, as opposed to cats, right? But everyone, who said that? Everyone. You want everyone voting? Everybody, everybody.
Everyone who's entitled to, like, citizens?
Well, who begs the question? Who's entitled?
Every rich white landowner can.
That's who you want voting? Yeah, you're right, you're right. I knew it, I was just trying to provide a little bit of comic relief. But, in all seriousness though, should there be some ground rules? I'm talking in the context of 2013. Should there be some ground rules in terms of, look, if you can't even do X, Y, and Z, then I'm sorry, you don't get to vote who becomes the next president. Any thoughts on this? I see a head nodding up here. What ought to be maybe at least one benchmark you got to do to vote? Any thoughts?
How do we,
Know how to read. In 2013? I don't know, it's just an opinion.
I think so. That's when people start to learn, like, be more educated.
Okay. I see what you're saying, right? That you don't want just anybody in the voting booth casting a ballot for, you know, the next president of the United States based on things that they just cannot wrap their mind around. But, I mean, think about it for a second. Are there people where if you were to require a really sophisticated literary system would probably not be able to vote? Would that be an issue? I'll give you an example. In 1892, what America did is we switched over to the secret ballots. And what that meant was, from now on, you would have to be able to read, not only read, but read in English in order to vote. And what happened to voting turnout after 1892? It plummeted, right? It plummeted. It fell off big time, primarily because all of these immigrants from places like Poland and Russia, China, Italy, they couldn't read the English language. And this is a long time before you would have a government mule next to the Democrats or an elephant next to the Republicans, so therefore the symbolism wasn't there either, okay? So my point is not necessarily to take this to task. All I'm saying is the idea of literacy tests have been used to disfranchise, take the vote away from specific groups of Americans. It's exactly what the Klan begins to do in the aftermath of the Civil War to ensure that black people are not voting, right? So somebody else, another benchmark. I agree with you that there ought to be benchmarks, and you too, that there ought to be benchmarks, right? But where should they end? Do you want just anybody voting? People with, but there again, I mean, you're not wrong, but who gets to be the decider in that respect? It's a very important question. Yeah,
People that wrote the independence,
the people that what?
the members that wrote the Declaration of
Yeah, ultimately, that's who's going to decide, but who wrote the Declaration?
Thomas Jefferson.
Rich white men, right?
Yeah.
In some cases, slave owners. So in that particular context, if you're a slave owner and you've got millions of dollars riding on the continuation of slavery, you probably don't want too many non-slave owners, be they workers like Douglas's white slave, that would be voting for candidates that would outlaw the institution of slavery. So this is a really loaded question, right? And I'll end this discussion, or this segment anyway, with an old adage, right? Lost my train of thought, but the people that, there's too much of any one thing, right? That's where I was driving at. That there is such a thing as too much democracy, there is such a thing as too much freedom. Okay, does that make sense? Now, one of the individuals that did believe in this concept of too much freedom would be John Adams. Okay? Now, for your notes, what John Adams was a conservative Republican. Now, I don't mean people like Sarah Palin or Ted Cruz or somebody like that. I'm talking about an individual that feared the tyranny of the majority, right? In history, there have been some things that have been wildly popular. Like, slavery for a while was wildly popular. But ultimately, it was a cancer. I mean, Lincoln understands that, you know, if America is to survive, that cancer needs to be cut out. Slavery needs to be removed from American politics. Okay? John Adams worries about the ability of the untutored masses, the people that do not really understand the political issues at hand, the people that cannot read a newspaper, cannot read the legal rhetoric of a bill, and most importantly, the people that don't have any vested interest in the decisions that government makes. For instance, you don't have any land, you don't own any land, you don't have a lot of money in the bank. Do you really care how much taxes go up on properties? Of course not. So you say, yeah, tax the daylights out of those property owners, because it's not my property that's being taxed, right? John Adams worried about this, and he made this idea known in what comes to be known as his pamphlet, Thoughts on Government, well before the American Revolution even ended, right? So, John Adams is conservative in the sense that he doesn't want just anybody voting. He wants benchmarks for voting. He wants you to be able to understand what you're voting for, to be able to read the bill after it becomes a law. He wants a lot of checks and balances with respect to this decision-making ability. Now, on the other side of the aisle would be a state like Pennsylvania, okay? Now, Pennsylvanians said we need to enfranchise everybody, meaning anybody and everybody that's a dutiful citizen. They need to be out there making decisions, casting ballots, running for office for that matter, right? Lots of freedom, freedom on steroids. Now, to illuminate what I'm talking about, I want to introduce you to this concept of a unicameral versus bicameral house. And if you've ever taken a government political science class, you'll understand what I'm talking about. In the American Congress, right, that's the body of the government that makes laws. What does a law have to do before it becomes a law? It is proposed, it's proposed to the Senate by a House. Somebody over here said it, the House of Representatives. So in the House of Representatives, laws are born, right? Everybody has to wear pink pants on Friday. It's the law. But before it can become a law, it goes into the Senate. And the Senate has to either approve it, scrap it, or send it back to the House of Representatives to be revised, right? As a matter of fact, what you're seeing right now is very similar to the situation that I've just described, right? What is the advantage of having a two-cameral house? A lower house and an upper house, yeah?
It would help signify balance within the masses.
Yes, there is balance, but I like to think of it even simpler than that. Anybody else want to chime in?
Counteract bias.
Yes, it does get rid of some bias because you're going to have to get the approval of other people.
Like isn't the House represented by one party and less than the other? So
Right.
Both sides of the argument have
So there is balance, we'll come back to that, but I like to think of it as an idiot check, right? It's a way of catching a bad law before a bad law can become a law, right? In other words, somehow, some way, this law managed to get itself out of the House of Representatives. Before it's implemented, the Senate has to sign off on it. And so what the Senate can do is say, you're crazy, no, we're not going down that road, do it all over again, right? It's a good thing because you do have to debate this. You do have to go out there and convince your colleagues in the upper house, the Senate. This is why this would be an advantage to the American people. This is why we ought to go down this road. Now, is it only a good thing? Are there any drawbacks? Turn on the news and you'll see drawbacks, right? The drawback with the bicameral approach to legislating is it moves at a glacier's pace, right? Have you ever heard of the expression herding cats?
Yes.
When you think about herding animals, you think sheep, you think cattle. You generally don't think about cats because they're very independent-minded. They'll go every which way on you, right? Herding cats is a lot like trying to get a law passed in the American Congress. It moves painfully slow. So sometimes so slow, you have like what's happening right now, the government actually shuts down because the two houses can't agree. That's the problem that we're facing with right now. The House of Representatives wants to do one thing, the Senate says, not so fast, my friends, and what you've got is gridlock. So the advantage is, yeah, you're going to catch more bad laws before they can become laws, but the problem, the downside, is it moves so painfully slow. It's gridlock, right? Now, on the flip side of the coin, which is what they did in Pennsylvania, right? You've got a unicameral house. So one house says, pink pants on Friday? Yes, please. Right? And it becomes law. So the advantage is it's faster. You can actually get stuff done. Right? The downside is the downside is you can get a lot more bad laws, and there are fewer checks and fewer roadblocks that bad laws would have to go through before they become actual concrete laws. Does that make sense? So here's the thing, guys. We're all over the map, right? I mean, we don't want a big, strong central government, but at the same time, it's becoming increasingly evident that it probably wouldn't be a bad idea. We want to expand freedom and democracy to as many people as we possibly can, but there are problems with that, right? So the fact of the matter is, we have been saying for the over 10 years how things were going to be once we grew up and we had our own country, and then we grew up and we had our own country, and we're all over the map on that, right? Now, enter into the conversation groups of Americans that are now seeking a public voice. Now, I need you to understand something. During this time period, America is anything but democratic with a small d. 51% of the population, women, don't have the right to hold office. They don't have the right in certain instances to sit on juries, to testify in court, to own property. As a matter of fact, if you were a woman and you worked, right, and your boss paid you, that money is the property of your husband. And if you're not married, it's the property of your father, right? So for all intents and purposes, women are not free, at least by our standards, yeah.
I was going to say, isn't that because it was how British society was?
Yeah, we inherited not just a British, but a Western European society too, which generally relegated women to second-class citizenship, right? There's old Western customs and culture that emphasize, look, politics is a man's world, there's no place for a lady, therefore we're doing you a favor by keeping you away from this, right? There's another philosophy that emphasizes woman's natural place is in the home. Part of this is by bias, sexism, and the other part is by custom, right? Well, one of the ladies that was particularly offended by this was the wife of a conservative Republican, a lady by the name of Abigail Adams. And in this letter that she wrote to her husband, as he was elected the Vice President of the United States, he's George Washington's VP, right? She says, John, don't forget about the ladies. Don't forget to enfranchise. Don't forget to empower America's ladies. That when it says all men are created equal, this really is a political coup. It really means all men and women are created equal and have these inalienable rights. Okay? What do you think the guys had to say about Abigail Adams and the right to vote?
They laughed at her.
Yeah, exactly. No way, man. So if women are going to gain any kind of rights, they got to be doing what women have been doing since the beginning of time. What is it that women do when it comes to gaining power? Reverse psychology with their husbands. Right? Right? The guys will understand this. Right? You go downstairs, your wife's giving you the silent treatment, you say, what's wrong? What's she say? Nothing. You guys go crazy when you do that. I swear, I think like it's like some seminar that women go to that do this with. But another story for another time. One of the women of this time that understands this at a very direct level, that would be Judith Sargent Murray, who wrote this piece called On the Equality of Sexes, right? And what she argues, you're going to have to think about this maybe not so much in the literal sense. She argues, look, ladies, I'm sorry, but the guys have it right. We should not be voting. Why should we not be voting? The men are smarter than us. It's a lady saying this. Now, the guys will be able to answer this question for me. Our brains are bigger. Right? Biologically speaking, our brains are bigger. But what do we use all those extra brain cells for?
Motor functions.
Memorizing lines in movies. That's what we use them for. Right? So anyway, what she's doing is she's invoking a stereotype, a myth, right? Doesn't exist. But what she's articulating is something underneath the surface level of voting. She said, look, before you can vote, you ought to be educated. You ought to be able to read. So what do we need to do for American women so that we can eventually empower them? Educate them. And what she's pushing for is the public education of girls. And to a large extent, she's quite successful. Because as far east as Massachusetts, to as far west as Wisconsin, what will eventually become Wisconsin, what you see are not only the rise of schools, K through 8th grade, you also see literacy rates, particularly for American women, particularly in the North, begin to rise. So you're beginning to see a well-educated society. And by doing that, it's taking one more excuse away from the guys who are saying, look, ladies shouldn't be voting because blah, 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 blah. Right? Does that make sense? All right. Now, this is really going to be important, not just for this class, but really for your midterm, and really the first half of the semester, generally speaking. I don't care what particular democracy you're talking about. It's usually the case that democracies are organized with the central governing document, right? And we're no exception to that rule. And in 1777, before the revolution actually ended, the central governing document of American democracy were the Articles of Confederation, right? The Articles of Confederation. Now let me get the definition out of the way for you very early, right? The Articles of Confederation set up a loose and weak, write it down, weak central government. Loose and weak central government. And what that meant, everybody, was that more power was granted to the local, to the state level. It makes sense, doesn't it? We're fighting a big, centralized, what we perceive to be as abusive federal government, central government. So the last thing that we wanted was a big, powerful central government after the war was won. Now, we're thinking about this, and we're saying we want to bring government as close to the people as humanly possible. So down here in Texas, who knows our needs, our problems, our culture, our attitudes better than Texans? Do we want people in Washington ramming something that they feel is best for us down our throats? No. We know how to plan our lives better than those far-off bureaucrats in Washington. So that's the concept behind the Articles of Confederation, that allow your neighbors, your townspeople, the people that make up your state, that know you better than anybody else, give them the power to plan out the government and not this big centralized government. It makes sense. If you consider the context, we're fighting a big centralized government, it makes even more sense. Okay? Questions? Is this clear? Tell me if it's not.
So that made it easier too, right?
Well, theoretically, yes. Yeah, theoretically, yes. But as a matter of fact, what you're about to find out with the Articles of Confederation, they almost killed the United States before there even was a United States. The weak central government. State government is another story, but a weak central, think of it, Washington government. Exactly, central. Now, the Articles of Confederation do give the federal government, the central Washington government, some powers. It does give the central government the ability to raise armies. It does give the central government the ability to make treaties between nations, us and somebody else. It does give the central government the ability to resolve disputes in the lands that we picked up from Britain in the West, the Appalachian Mountain Range and West, right? Now there's something that is really, really key that I did not mention. A power that is not granted to the federal government. What did I not mention?
Taxes.
Exactly. What good is an army if it doesn't have any guns? How is a government supposed to give its army guns and uniform and pay its officers if it doesn't have the ability to raise any money? So for your notes, one of the big limitations of the Articles, it does not allow the federal government to tax the people directly. The only people that can tax you, your state government. Now, the problem with this, amongst other problems, but the biggest problem is we're in debt up to our eyeballs, right? We took on enormous, unimaginable amounts of debt in the American Revolution. And now we don't have a way to pay it. So our country was almost broke before we even became a country. The Articles of Confederation sound like a great idea on paper. Your neighbor's going to be making your laws for you, not some faraway governor that you don't know, never met, and probably don't like very much. But when it comes to practicality, when it comes to implementing it, it's a nightmare, right? Now, there's something else that I didn't mention. The economy. We have a very diverse collection of people living over here. And in a place like Massachusetts, you're beginning to see the development of an American industry. Textiles, right? So if you live in Massachusetts, you want American consumers of textile to buy your textiles, not the British competitors. So to encourage them to do that, what might you do?